welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm going to share with you guys just a very brief summary of some work we've just started as of last fall. Probably not surprisingly, because anybody who has been living in California probably inundated with the information about wildfires and specifically about cannabis and wildfire, which seem to dominate media coverage. And so at the CRC, we became very interested in putting some data to these very dire stories that we've been hearing. And so the first thing that we did was we took California Cannabis grower data and a few different metrics of fire threat. And so the first one I'm going to show you here, resolution, I hope is good enough for you to see, but just a map of California. The red is fire perimeters just from 2020. And so if you've not seen a map like this already, this might be kind of surprising to you compared to the yellow, which is the entire preceding decade, and the black being all fires back to 1950. So as you can see, 2020 was a pretty remarkable year. And unfortunately, as you can see, there's a lot of overlap in areas where cannabis is produced. So this is a first look at cannabis compared to other agricultural sectors, including grapes, hay or pasture, and then just all of the row crops. And what we used was this Cal Fire Hazard Severity metric, which is based on the terrain and fuel load and other things that serve as a summary of how prone an area is to wildfire. And so as you can see, cannabis far and away is it's in rough shape, in very high fire hazard severity zones. Another thing we looked at was, what else can let me advance, this proximity to wildfire. And so specifically within cannabis producing counties, we looked at the last 50 years and compared the most recent 5 years to the preceding 45. And as you can see, pretty much across the board in all these major cannabis producing counties, we're seeing a reduction in the proximity between wildfire and cannabis. And so while these distances are, on the order of, as you can see, about 40 kilometers or so for the typical farm, the prospect of them being inundated with cannabis or inundated with wildfire smoke is obviously a concern. And so finally, the last piece of data I wanted to show you is the projections for the future. And so again, these are the 11 most the most cannabis producing counties. The number one being Santa Barbara. As a quick aside, we've also been looking at some enrollment data, and Santa Barbara has now become the top cannabis producing county in terms of cultivated acreage in California. And as you can see, it is the majority, it's over 75% of the farms in Santa Barbara are in areas that are projected to be intensifying wildfire hotspots. So that's just a brief summary of the work we've been doing since this fall. The one takeaway that I really want to mention is that out of the over 2,200 cannabis licensed farms in California, there were only 14 that were actually within a burn perimeter. We didn't confirm whether or not they burned, but while that's less than it's less than 1%, about 0.5% of all the cannabis farms, as Van pointed out the other day to me, it's relative to the other numbers we were seeing, it's something like 25 times higher than grapes, and no other type of agriculture even was in a fire perimeter. So important to note, but also the proximity wildfires to cannabis, emphasizing that the threat of smoke damage is going to be a real issue. And so looking forward, we also received some money from the Bureau of Cannabis Control to do a more targeted outreach survey to get at these impacts of smoke damage more specifically. And so we're really eager, probably next fall, to get a survey out to our licensed cannabis growers and hear about the impacts and also potential mitigation strategies. That's another issue with cannabis is the ability to get crop insurance is not really a thing as it is for other agriculture industries. So the ability for cannabis farmers to get as much help from each other and hopefully we can help facilitate that is a big thing we can offer. And then we're also going to be interested in facilitating connections between some testing facilities that we've established contacts with to get some samples of smoke damaged crops and to just get a better handle on what compounds we're seeing and potentially be able to learn more about how to mitigate for that damage. And then finally, we're hoping to do a more targeted spatial analysis of cannabis fire by looking at the zones where cannabis is and is not eligible for cultivation, where there's bans in place versus where there's permittable cannabis, and how that sort of interplays with the threat that cannabis receives from wildfire, which, as I've alluded to, is pretty unique among agricultural sectors. So that's all I have for you now. I'm looking forward to some questions, and I will turn it back over to Van.